Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to the Dreaming Prophet. Now, tonight is a very special public service announcement sponsored for and paid by the state representatives at my door right now. Remember, kids, when the feds come knocking, you answer even when your doorbell isn't rigged with a mind-controlling music box. They were very insistent on tonight's topic, so buckle on in because we're legally required to say it and you're legally required to listen, no matter how all of us mutually, tearfully regret the experience. Because tonight, we will be discussing the birds and the bees on the astral plane. Because our slash funding didn't cover avocados, so we're stuck talking about voices. Improv, kids! It's wonderful. Put down your hand, Xaviul. We aren't taking questions. My name is Lavanya.
And I'm Astro.
I'm Bellamy.
And I'm Xaviul.
This is a Blackout Club show for Blackout Club players with minimal speculation, all lore, and a focus on the known facts. Our topic of the day is Daimon 101.
There will be a test afterwards, so stay tuned.
Now, our spoiler warning for today is everything related to Daimons. We're not digging into the individual characters because we have separate episodes for that, which hopefully you've listened to, especially the Speak as one, the most important one, the best one. But we are digging into the general rules of how they work. That means our content warnings are general horror themes, as always, unreality and hallucinations, narcotic drugs, possessions, genocide, and general murder.
There will also be a brief mention of child abuse.
So, our big question of the day that we're going to start off with is, what are Daimons? But before we get into that, we should discuss the themes of the Blackout Club and the use of children as protagonists, because that is a huge part of what the Daimons are and why they function the way that they do. So the main characters of the Blackout Club are children. It was mentioned in the official Discord that actually in initial development of the Blackout Club, back when they were first throwing around ideas, they were going to have adult player characters, but then they changed their mind. So the player characters being children is important to the narrative and important to the themes. Adolescence is a time of discovering agency, identity, and overcoming the learned helplessness that is being a kid. As a kid, your parents tie your shoelaces, and eventually as you grow up, either you discover the beauty of Velcro or you learn to tie them yourself. The main characters of the game are children, and in light of that, the Daimons can be seen as the ultimate authority figures. As the enemies say repeatedly throughout the game, Speak as One are your parents, your teachers, they're every adult in town. If your mom isn't possessed by SAO, then your neighbor might be possessed by TID. Daimons are the adults, narratively, to the PC's children, especially when they and Unknown Caller are the only characters that we actually interact with. And this ties into the rules that they follow in the narrative of the story. The adult characters are all bound by various rules. Laws, most of all, which becomes evident in the fact childhood is the process of learning them and breaking them, as seen by the fact the PCs run around tranking people, vandalizing buildings, and breaking and entering. Daimons have the authority that the PCs give them. Narratively speaking, they are ideals, and all of them want you to conform to theirs, and they are trying to teach you to conform to theirs, or order you to, through their God talks. But, as any high school teachers can attest, that doesn't mean that the player characters actually do.
The Daimons themselves have defined themselves in multitudes of ways through dreams and interactions. Speak as One holds that the Daimons rose from patterns but came prior to humanity, while the song connects Daimons in Speak as One. The Measure Cuts says God is an imprecise moniker for Daimons. Die For You agrees, saying Daimons are simpler and they are driven to motivate humans to action. The Measure Cuts also says they exist on a scale between parasite and hallucination. He says gender of Daimons depends on the perspective. The Idea says they are affected and changed by humans gradually. He believes Daimons don't exist without humanity.
The Idea, when he's speaking of Speak as One's treatment of humanity versus his, stated that they think they came to be first. I think we owe ourselves to you. Is that true? Is that false? Who knows, but that's the Idea's perspective. He also stated that animals cannot host Daimons, only humans can.
and this may be related to animals lacking sapience. Vaguely, we consider having sapience to involve possessing a great deal of amount of wisdom, and in some cases we even define it as inherent to the human species. We are, after all, Homo sapiens. But more concretely, science often considers qualities like advanced reasoning capabilities and language skills as a prerequisite for sapience. This is why we're so interested in studying animal languages, as with teaching apes sign language and learning dolphin whistles, as well as with animal ability to reason, recall, and use tools, as with crows. However, while many animals possess some of these abilities, they are invariably nowhere near the level of what humanity can perform. We can ask apes to memorize symbols with highly specific meanings, for example, but they will peak around the same amount of words known as about a 3-year-old and be unable to utilize syntax the way that we can. Of course, there are examples of humans lacking some or all of these abilities as well. Case studies of children like Jeannie and Victor Aveyron, who were found at age 13 and 12 respectively in abusive circumstances that prevented them from learning language, showed that it was impossible to teach them native fluency in any language. Interestingly, that is also shortly before the same age that the voice is considered to be a limit for taking people as hosts. Aside from age, we don't know what the Daimons' requirements for their hosts are, but the differences between human children and animals may offer us some insight and food for thought.
And that leads us into the next topic, the differences between humans and Daimons. To start off, we're going to dig into the origin of the Daimons. Speak as One is our only narrator that actually has a good idea on how Daimons might have been created in the first place. They state that they, as the first Daimon, were born out of recurring patterns, always changing, always evolving. These patterns were created by the first branches of humanity, way back when we were still in caves and we didn't have any specific genetic species names to refer to. Speak as One in this early stage was defined and changed by human thought, because Speak as One, per themselves, were every facet of humanity that was conscious at that point. That appears to be the case for most Daimons in reality. They are all defined and changed by human thought, and that's one of the key points of their characters. The birth order of Daimons, as far as we know, was Speak as One, who was the original collective and consisted of everything at that point in time. At some point afterwards, the idea was born and split off of him. He was born presumably from the defectors from that initial massive collective. In her teeth was the third born, with the concept of death and time as people first began to acknowledge. Things changed, but in the end, everything is gonna fucking croquet. We don't know with the rest of the voices the exact order of their birth, but we do know that Seed the Grudge is confirmed to be younger than the majority. Daimons as a whole are symbiotic to humanity, and they are spawned from our sentience. Basically, they wouldn't exist without us, and they rely on us for their existence. But the real question is, would we be able to survive without them? We don't know.
And with the voices being symbiotic to humanity, it might be worth exploring the different kinds of symbiosis that occur naturally. Symbiosis itself is a beneficial relationship between two different organisms where they exchange things like resources, safety, or even services. Sometimes this can be a mutually beneficial relationship, but oftentimes it's pretty one-sided as well. Symbiosis that is mutually beneficial is called mutualism. An example of this is plover birds that pick out old food scraps from the teeth of crocodiles. This seems pretty dangerous for the bird to be sitting in the mouth of a crocodile, but in reality it's preventing the crocodile from infections caused by rotten food bits stuck in its mouth. Meanwhile, the bird itself is getting the benefit of a meal out of this exchange. Symbiosis where one organism is helped while another is mostly unaffected is called commensalism. For example, tree frogs using plants to hide. This helps the tree frogs, obviously, but doesn't do much to help or harm the plants either way. Meanwhile, symbiosis that involves one organism benefiting to the harm of another organism is called parasitism. Fleas or ticks living on an animal host, for example, these feed off of the blood of their host, harming it, and offer it no benefit in return. In fact, we usually want parasites off of us as quickly as possible.
Do Daimons offer a benefit to their hosts in mutualism, or do they only take, which would be parasitism? Or do they just take from their host to the result of no help or no harm? It's not entirely clear, and the answer probably changes depending on what facet of Daimon behavior you want to pay attention to. The characters don't have a consensus on it. The player base definitely does not either. But regardless of what specific definition that they follow, Daimons rely on humanity. When Daimons don't have a host, they cannot experience physical sensations and they cannot affect the physical world. Daimons cannot speak to each other or interact without hosts as intermediaries. So when they're just fucking around wherever the Daimons go when they're not hosting, they are entirely alone. Which is pretty fucking sad if you ask me. Luckily, they do have hosts to communicate. So the ways that this communication can go is basically sleep talking is the biggest one of them, and working through their host's dreams. Sleep talking means that when somebody goes unconscious, their lips keep flapping, but they're not talking about their dreams. They're being used as a neat little finger puppet, meat sack.
The Idea worded it this way. He said, sleep talkers serve as a, quote, summit, unquote, for the voices.
And a less intimate and viscerally upsetting turn of phrase, the second option is dreams.
Daimons can hear all answered dreams, even if the prayer was not addressed to them, and even if the players receiving that dream are not their hosts. As the Idea says, in dreams the walls are thinner.
This isn't speaking to other voices directly as far as we know. Two daemons cannot be in the same dream unless two daemons are sharing a host. This is implied to be a form of intimacy. Of the daemons, we know that Laflast and In Her Teeth frequently used to share hosts, and also referred to themselves as married before their unfortunate and deeply tragic breakup. Xaviul stated that he might have to share a host with the Idea before he went ahead and he pledged loyalty to him. But not only did he pledge loyalty, he pledged loyalty to him for the entire span of a human lifespan, which seems pretty intimate to me. Not with the Red Acre children's lifespans, but if you're talking in the abstract, it's pretty intimate. But that's not the only way that daemons communicate with each other or to their host. The other way is through speech. Speech seems difficult for the oldest daemons. The Idea says that it's hard, which may be due to the fragmentation, but Speak as One says that it is actively fucking painful for them. Younger daemons don't seem to have this problem to the degree that they pretty much never shut up. They are always talking and always using those stolen words because daemons are not actually capable of producing voices that are not taken from their host. It's implied that the voices that we hear when daemons are talking are essentially taken from their favorite host, which is most explicitly stated by TMC.
Also a little fucked up.
Also a little fucked up, but in a way, isn't it touching? The fact that even after you die, your favorite eldritch abomination will steal a part of you to clutch close to them, flesh puppet you.
I'm about to say, you don't get to talk about finger puppets and then say that it's touching.
I mean, well, if we're finger puppets, it's literally touching.
I'm quitting the fucking podcast.
Now, there may be an actual difference between the voices that speak and those that use text. Because text voices, such as the Idea and Speak as One, you can only see what they're saying when you close your eyes. Speaking from experience, no matter how hard you close your eyes, no matter how hard you ignore it, you can't ignore a voice to voice. Sorry, In Her Teeth, I tried. And no matter how much Speak as One complains that speaking is physically painful for them, it's interesting to note that their most hostiest of hosts.
The host with the most?
The host with the most. The voice does in fact speak. Not only do they speak, but they use two sets of vocal cords to do it. So that seems pretty, interesting. But outside of gameplay, what's interesting is that there is an implication with the spoken voices that other people cannot hear them. They seem to be speaking to one person at a time. When Hadley is being antagonized and terrorized by multiple voices, there's no mention anywhere of the fact that he heard voices or that anyone heard demonic creatures fucking following him around and negging him. There's never a mention in the overall lore of multiple characters hearing a spoken voice. So it's interesting to examine, is that an aspect of gameplay that everyone in the game can hear the spoken voices? Or is that something that's supposed to be unique to the PCs? We know with the written voices, either their text messages can appear to all the players in the game or to individual players. When it comes to the written voices, so basically the Idea Speak as One, we know that they can either speak to an individual player or else they can send their messages to every player in the game. So theoretically, it should be the same possibility for the voiced ones. But like I said, gameplay or lore, it's up for grabs. Since we're speaking about the spoken voices, which leads us back onto the topic of the written voices. What's interesting is there's a clear phenomenon in place and an understanding for the spoken voices. Everyone understands how you can hear voices in your head. But how does it work when you close your eyes and you see written words? There's a book in the early prologue that basically hints at one of the ways that this could be explained. It's called the prisoner's cinema. What the prisoner's cinema is a phenomenon of a light show of various colors that appear out of darkness when someone has not achieved enough stimuli from their overall environment. This is called a form of closed-eye hallucinations.
As for closed-eye hallucinations, there's actually several levels of them, 5 to be exact. Level 1 is just random light and dark visual noise with no particular pattern or reasoning to it. This is pretty normal for everyone to see with their eyes closed, and some individuals with conditions like visual snow might even see similar with their eyes open. Following that, we actually see this in-game whenever the player closes their eyes. Level 2 is characterized by light and dark flashes that occur with relaxation and concentration. It's a progression of the level 1 visual noise to larger, more intense patches of white, black, and sometimes even faint colors. Level 3 is again a progression of the previous level to form patterns, motion, and more prominent colors. For most people who aren't in deep meditation or on psychedelics, this occurs when they're on the edge of sleep. Level 4 is where we begin to see what might more traditionally be referred to as active hallucinations of specific objects and people. These can get pretty complex. For example, one study that we'll link in the episode notes, done by Huang et al. In 2016, shows a patient developing intense visual hallucinations of a pastoral scene with an unknown man in it that only appeared when he closed his eyes. Not when he blinked, not when he was in a dark room, but only in the physical sensation of closing his eyes and keeping them shut. Now, think of the lines that the player characters spout when they're shaped. Does this sound familiar at all? And level 5 is defined as involving hallucinations that override physical perception, which is also something that happens in an REM sleep. In fact, achieving this in a waking state usually involves deep relaxation, typically in a sensory deprivation tank, or, as referred to by the prisoner's cinema name, a long-term sensory deprivation and isolation of the like that people experience in the prison cells of Alcatraz's solitary confinement, which prison guards illegally often kept dark. Brain systems that normally stop this depth of hallucination have been inhibited in these circumstances, and your physical senses interpret hallucinations as entirely real.
So, if I'm understanding Bellamy's TMC-worthy lecture right, does that mean that lavanya is like my parasite? Because I have to carry them through almost every mission, and all I ever get from it is getting dragged by the lucids. They get all the snacks.
If I was your brain parasite, I would make sure that you hallucinated that I was never there, so I never had to hear you talking.
In the game, there are also several references to a similar but also quite different sensation called synesthesia. Oxford Lexicon defines synesthesia as the production of a sense impression relating to one sense or part of the body by stimulation of another sense or part of the body. Surveys of synesthetes show possibly 73 or more different types of synesthesia, but the most common types are grapheme to vision, displayed by 61% of respondents, musical sounds to vision, 18% of respondents, and general sounds to vision, 16% of respondents.
Now, we know that TMC and SAO have set up Red Acre to be their own special little sociological study camp, but music to sound synesthesia would be awfully useful for the Red Acre kids.
It is mentioned in this context. There's specifically a voice line that refers to a child who finds their way into the maze who shows signs of synesthesia, which interests the voice.
Hallucinations during blackout dreams are a fascinating example of the prisoner's cinema at play. And so is the moon. From our point of view, players are physically transported by the Daimons, but per their own rules, they can't actually be transporting us. They can't move us. They can only make us move ourselves. And no amount of determination, pep, and teenage spite for the rules will allow you to travel through like 60 million miles of empty space to climb onto the moon. So it has to be a hallucination. And as we discussed above, it pretty much is guaranteed to be a closed-eye hallucination. Specifically level 5, because it involves the physical perception. The ambience changes when you're on the moon. Everything looks different. Unfortunately, no matter how high you jump, you will not float off of it. So even that's a little bit different. Now, you can close your eyes on the moon, so it's not a traditional black. And we know that it's not literally the moon because it's been confirmed as such by the Daimons. Die For You specifically says that the moon, however, even if it does have air and oxygen and strange furniture that you could theoretically sit on, is bad and dangerous. Players are taken there when time runs short.
I can't believe Last made me black out when I was getting dragged to my death by a lucid.
Laugh just thought it would be funny if they tried to shove you into the door, and Speak as One tried to climb into your ear like the worst sort of earworm, but they just kept getting a currently occupied sign, so they had to wait.
As you're just standing outside the door of my mind, hitting on it. Let me in! Let us in!
Speaking of Laugh dodged the question about where the moon actually is, because out of all of the Daimons, and this is the Dreaming Prophet verified fact, he's just the fucking worst.
Wow.
That was a wow of all that I could say something so honest yet brutally true.
Some humans are naturally resistant to hearing the voices. Some can hear them very well. The voice, in fact, are two humans with the unique ability to hear and translate the song into words that, us humans can actually hear. Redacre exists to create a population that can hear the song very well. This is partially through genetics, but it's also largely through upbringing. We're told that Nayeli, who was presumably born and raised in Redacre, is so unused to conflict and dissonance that it actually makes her sick. Redacre's culture encourages conformity, getting along with each other, and a high focus on the community, the same things required to work well within the song. Humans can hear all the voices until around 15, and some into adulthood, like Hoadley the pastor, who, well, let's not say it's always a good thing to be able to hear him.
Sometimes having good hearing is just a curse when you can't tune out the riffraff.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
With the air turning crisp and pumpkin spice lattes making their way to local coffee shops, many residents of Redacre are starting to turn half a mind to what costume they'll be wearing at the end of the month. Well, look no further. Now available at a retailer near you, we have all kinds of Halloween masks. For those who prefer the classics, devil masks come in all colors from red to blue. For a more cutesy look, an adorned skull mask might do the trick. And for those truly dedicated to striking fear into the hearts of children, well, they can't do better than the Baby Mask series. Buy your Halloween mask today!
The Daimons have a few abilities that have been laid out in the lore of the game. The first is the Old Tongue. This is the language of movement and sonic elements that is their native language. A few of the Daimons have commented that they sprang from it. Daimons are very used to using it. However, humans, after their minds were corrupted by the word, can be driven mad if they try to form complex thoughts in it for long periods of time. However, they can deal with it in limited quantities. Characters can perform the gestures that we have in-game, and can be forced into performing them by Dance for Us and potentially other Daimons. These gestures appear constantly on projectors in the cryptogram library. The cryptogram library is also where we can witness what is called a rare gesture. The only documented instance of a rare gesture currently in-game is the Old Tongue phrase, "Drink the Sky." This has been confirmed to be a story about Dance for Us, not her name, but a legend which records her history of forcing humans to perform the Old Tongue and other dances until they die.
The Old Tongue is one of their abilities, but it's not their only ability. In her teeth implies that she has something that is unique to her. She states in her sacrifice table that she can see someone's death and tell them how it will occur. Is this a bluff? Is this a fact? Or is this just trying to comfort someone? Because humans die, but Daimons don't. So theoretically, she might have seen every single form of death available to someone because humans aren't that creative when it comes to certain things. We have no fucking idea. In her teethites, that's something to ask her. How will you die? Make it dark.
They're not in her teethites, they're called cavity creeps.
Daimons have a poor grasp on our means of tracking time, so in her teeth statement is doubly interesting. Dear listeners, personally speaking, I think it's just bullshit. But what do you think? Another ability that we actually know that Daimons have is body jacking. This can be suppressed and fought off by other Daimons, but an individual by themselves cannot fight off a voice. Xaviul and Course note that they have means of putting Daimons to sleep in the sleeper tales. But as far as we know, once a Daimon has chosen someone as a permanent host, you can't just rip them out short of killing the individual. Die for You refers to the entire Daimon situation of Redacre as being too many mouths and not enough food. This could actually be assumed to be the case for the entire world. because all of the Daimons, for one reason or another, crept over to Redacre. So what does that mean about bodyjacking? We know that bodyjacking is just a basic function of Daimons and the ability that kind of defines them, because if they were not bodyjacking us, we wouldn't even know they fucking existed. But not all bodyjacking is necessarily just closing your eyes to discover that there's a voice in your ear whispering, trying to take over your thoughts. TMC waited to take his current voice as a host until he was ready to be taken. However, this sort of consideration for their host's actual desires and thoughts and plans is not at all typical. It is not required. And most don't bother to do it, not even SAO. Consent, they're all bad at it.
TMC's just, as Lavanya said before, one of those human sympathists.
There's one in every family.
Humanaboo.
Humanaboo.
Oh god! Fucking humanaboos ruining our conventions. And circling it back around to the moon and hallucinations, the moon landing was a hoax brought upon us by the voices in our heads. Wake up, people.
This has been authorized as 100% true by your loving host at the Dreaming Prophet. Hashtag moonlanding hoax.
But we can see that even when we are taken by the shape, that we are actively hallucinating. If you happen to make too many mistakes and get shaped, you'll notice that your kid produces lines, such as talking about how the sun looks amazing today, and you're not sure why you never seem to notice. Just look at it. I mean, wow.
We've covered the abilities of Daimons, so let's cover the abilities that humans give Daimons. Or more accurately, let's discuss the effects of humanities upon them. Now, we discussed parasitism and everything else earlier on in the episode, but there are some benefits that Daimons give to humans. Mostly these are just against other fucking Daimons, but you take what you can get. Daimons can serve as a second pair of eyes. As far as we know, they can only see through your eyes, but that said, they might notice things that you don't notice, like hidden messages left by other Daimons. The Daimons somehow, even though it's never made explicit, we're never informed which Daimons are responsible for it, are responsible for the sanctity of the clubhouse. The children are not hidden away from the antagonists of the game because kids are just that fucking good at hiding their trail and not throwing snacks into the river. They are hidden away because the Daimons on their side are actively working to hide them from Speak as One. Humanity can also use Daimons to understand things that they otherwise would not be able to see or understand. The Old Tongue is the biggest example of this. Humans will go insane if they try to form complex thoughts in the Old Tongue over extended periods of time. Presumably, if they're trying to sit around and read it as well, or watch it, or hear it, then things are going to go full king and yellow on them. However, Daimons can process the Old Tongue because that's their native language, or, depending on how you want to see it, that's their natural way of being. Speak as One uses their human host in the Somnicles along with the gas that they funnel up. They place their human host into a trance, which allows those hosts to see things that the Daimons could not see, and in turn, the Daimons can actually process and understand them. It's worth noting here that the stage 5 of closed eyes hallucination involves sensory deprivation tanks to achieve full-blown hallucination, which is pretty fairly typical to most people trapped without sensations. We evolved to hear, to feel, and to see things. And our bodies will accommodate that even if those senses or the ability to use them are taken from us. So basically what I'm saying here is, if you can't make your own homegrown sensation, then buying some at the Daimon Mart Hallucination Corp is just fine. It's difficult to know with the Blackout Club what bits of history are meant to be Daimon influenced and which are not. However, we've had a pretty steady groundwork laid with regards to the fact that Speak as One relies on gas for some reason, and gas is specifically linked to the Daimons. When we see the Idare's fragments, it appears as smoke. Speak as One submerges their host in the Somnically, full of gas, in order to see things that they would otherwise be unable to see. The metric hut states that daemons came from cave gas back in the day, which leads us to the historical figure of the Pythia. The Pythia was a historical prophet in classical Greece, and one of the most well-known ones in the records that we've retained. She existed in the Delphi area, and she was linked to Apollo, the god of prophecy.
This is a quote from a National Geographic article titled, "Delphic Oracle's lips may have been loosened by gas vapors." According to traditional explanations, the Pythia derived her prophecies in a small enclosed chamber in the basement of the temple. De Boer said that if the Pythia went to the chamber once a month, as tradition says, she could have been exposed to concentrations of the narcotic gas that were strong enough to induce a trance-like state.
And interestingly enough, a trance-like state is almost exactly the terminology used in-game to refer to the host that speak as one is submerging to gain answers.
I guess you could say it's literally true that SAO is full of hot air.
Wow!
Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the biology of the voices. There's not that much since, not really actual bodies for us to talk about.
Tragically, it turns out my statement at the beginning of this podcast was a lie, and there is no sex education for voices.
But we can't talk about their names. Humans have some control over daemons, especially through changing their nature through changing their names.
In the Discord, Null has written a few things about this. Quote, "Verb something gods are often stronger in our world. Thus, speak as one, which is an active command, rather than speaks as one. Quote, we have exceptions who limited themselves on purpose. The measure cuts and in her teeth break the formula because they are iconoclasts," end quote.
Daemons also seem to be able to change their own names, such as Dance for Us was once Dance for Me. And also, some kids really like to try to change their names for no reason. I'm looking at you kids that are using last laugh instead of laugh last. That's not even a verb. Some of the voices choose to try to isolate themselves to maintain coherency, such as Speak as One. Humanity defines daemons through their names and their beliefs. So the less you have of the outside world changing that, the better.
We've also been given symbols to couple with the daemons' names. Symbols are heavily associated with a daemon, but are not the be-all, end-all. According to our current understanding, which may not be entirely correct, destruction of a symbol weakens a daemon, but it does not kill them. Similarly, introduction of a symbol to an area increases the daemon's strength in that area, but it does not establish the daemon by themselves. What is most likely the Nameless's symbol, the Triskelion, was brought into Redacre, potentially drawing her there, but she, the individual, was brought in by the transmission of ideals associated with her, or something else.
Daemons are a little bit complex like that, but at the same time, they're also painfully simple. Now we're going to start talking here about the life cycle of daemons, which is as basic as any single-cell organism, because they don't have cells at all, can actually be. The first daemon, Speak as One, first as far as we know, was born from patterns, basically the reoccurring patterns of the proto-humanity and the eusocial behaviors that they espouse created Speak as One. As far as we know, no other voices have spawned from that alone. Every voice since then has, directly or indirectly, basically come from Speak as One in that original birth. Daemons cannot be born from symbols alone. Even though Speak as One has an entire archive of forbidden symbols, as we saw with the Nameless above, even though she was associated with the Triskelion, that alone did not draw her into Redacre. Symbols alone cannot create a daemon. However, they can be created through a number of different ways. Agents are currently the hot topic of the day. Agents are essentially facets of the original daemon. With the idea, we know that his agents are called fragments. Functionally, these are the leftover remnants of his host, but each of his fragments contain the memories of the piece of the idea that was with them. Speak as One's agents are called Watchers. We know that Speak as One steals parts of their followers to copy into the song. Original character, do not steal, does not apply to them. And sometimes they can turn these stolen copies or stolen pieces of their followers into parts of them, which are known as the Watchers. In her teeth, we don't know how her agents function, but we do know that she has them because Seed the Grudge is a former agent. All of these agents, if they gain sufficient worship, will become voices in their own stead. Even the shape potentially could become a voice in their own stead. We don't know the process exactly. We don't know if it's painful, but that sure is a thing that can happen. Another method through which daemons can be born is if they share a host. This is the case with Laflast and In Her Teeth. Even though they have not merged into one horrifying entity of death and malice.
In her last teeth.
No, we're not doing last teeth. Even though In Her Teeth and Laflast have not merged into one entity, and as far as we know, and hopefully, no matter what Xaviul says, they will not. We know that demons can merge, and we know that one can eclipse the other. The exact mechanisms, we have no fucking idea. Hit up your gods for that important talk about merging, kids.
It's the parasitic birds and the bees.
When a daemon gains a new name, the old name stays alive, and the new name becomes a new daemon. Sometimes it's implied that this process will snuff out the previous daemon, but we know that the Aidair's older copies of himself are still running around, so presumably that doesn't happen every single time. It doesn't always have to be that they flat out get a new name too. It can also be that the ideals or the beliefs of the population about the daemon have changed. As he has various progeny, were not born from new names as far as we know, but instead they were born from the realizations. In Her Teeth was born because they realized that death was a possibility and death was looming. The idea was born because of individuality. There's a lot of processes through which daemons can be born, and there's a lot of processes through which they can die.
Wow. What a good segue into death. And of course, number one on the death radar is In Her Teeth, who has stated before that voices cannot die, and she wants to fix that. Because I guess when you live forever, you want to figure out how to die. I don't know. I don't understand her. This is why we divorced.
Everyone needs a hobby. The easiest form of death, and arguably the most efficient, are the culls. This is when all of the hosts of a certain individual are killed. Even during a cull, the voice can be revived. Unfortunately. Culls often also involve shattering and burning the symbols, because the best way to disrupt belief is just to erase all possibilities of you ever returning to it. Salt the earth.
And then you have fragmenting, which, when names are torn apart, they can be reconstructed. At least we think so. There's also the death by name theft, which is another god just, ripping the name right out of you. Apparently, the 8th can do this, and has in the past. Nameless is one example of a god that's still floating around, even though they don't have a name.
The Aidair has suggested that in stealing her name, one might also steal her entire domain.
So even though I'm incredibly enthusiastic about cataloging all the various little nooks and cranny of daemon physiology and how it works, it's worth keeping in mind this is not actually scientific literature, so our understanding is apt to change as new things are revealed in the future. And as this is a player's-fed narrative, even though I threw forward my thoughts at the start of the podcast, some of these themes may actually change as the game progresses. And if they do, we might expect the rules of the daemons to shift to match. Or else they might not. Ultimately, a lot can be figured out about the various intricate details of the Blackout Club as a study through the foreshadowing that has been placed throughout the plot. The 8th was present in dreams from the beginning of the game. The Triskelion has always been in the attic room, and we've always been shown that Watchers are individuals as much as they are part of the hive mind. Each development we get, once you go back and you look at the whole, is not necessarily a surprise, even if the information in itself is new. We're going to see more of this as time goes by. As we get new developments, and as this information changes, remember, get excited, don't get frustrated. It's a gorgeous story, and we're all along for the ride. And all of the information will eventually be available for us to see. Or at least most of it. I hope.
This episode was Lavanya's special research project. Because episodes 8 and this one, episode 9, were a lot of work to put together, we're going to have a more content-light episode 10, which will be the end of season 1 of the podcast. Season 2 will start with episode 11, and we'll be back in the saddle with hardcore lore. Cal, Archer's Volley and Skigulium, has made a lore master doc. If you want to know what's been going on in the game since the beginning of recorded god encounters, go ahead and check it out. They're trying to source as much information as possible with transcripts and videos, compiling disparate info into something comprehensible. Cass has made a lore primer comic. This is a compilation of some of the latest in the lore field and also some basics, broken down from an in-character perspective. If you know someone who's new to the game, this is a great introduction. Spoderman has made a transcript master doc. If you have transcripts or video links, please send them to him. Information is on the doc at tinyurl.com/tbctranscripts. This is a valuable place to see old interactions because all past transcripts posted publicly in the Discord have been compiled here. There's also now an official interaction archive on the Discord. This archives both God Talks and personal dreams. It's brand new and most of the stuff on it is recent, though a few people have reached out to put their old logs on it. If you're interested in seeing this or adding your own, join the Discord to get involved. discord.gg/the Blackout Club. The Blackout Club was made by Question Games. Our advertising director is Bellamy. Our transcript and video is by Lavanya. Audio editing is by me, Astro. Our publicity is done by Spoderman. Xaviul doesn't like green eggs and ham.